Hello, this is Barry Shaw, The View from Israel. First of all, I want to thank many of you who sent me very complimentary messages about a video I did recently about the perilous state of Jews and Israel in, of all places, Sweden. And as a result of that, I decided to take another step forward. And this time, in two videos, I'll be addressing the situation for Jews and Israel inside a country that I personally have liked up to now, and that is Holland, the Netherlands. And in order to help me in my discussion here, I've invited a student at Maastricht University. His name is Ethan Bergman, to join me on the show today. Ethan, welcome to The View from Israel.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shaw. I'm happy to be here.
No, you call me Barry, it's okay. Look, I want to, as a sort of an intro, I want to tell you, I gave a talk in Amsterdam, or a couple of talks in Amsterdam about 50 years ago or something like that. And unfortunately, my experience then caused me to write a book, which was Fighting Hamas, BDS, and Anti-Semitism. And after my visit, it caused me to write another one. Basically, it was aimed for students like yourself, called BDS for Idiots. And it were based on my experiences there in Holland, which I may go into detail later on. But I want to tell you why I want to pose it to you is that I've been troubled with what's been happening, for instance, this year. And a few of the highlights I want to give you are, for instance, a highlight from May. May was a time when Israel was under most enormous terror attack, rocket attack from Hamas in Gaza. Over 4,000 rockets were fired at Israel at the initiative of Palestinian Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, at no prior provocation from Israel. And yet at that time, you had 564 Dutch academics calling to sever ties with Israel over the Gaza fighting. This was when we were defending ourselves. And we've now had also this year, this month actually, December, where you had a Dutch far-left party calling a Holocaust event racist. I mean, from an Israeli and Jewish perspective, this is sheer insanity. But I know you've got problems on campus. And before I let you speak to us about Maastricht, I want to give our viewers another example. That a Dutch university, and this one was the Amsterdam State Academic of Fine Arts. Now, you would have thought these are refined people, intellectuals involved in fine art. And they posted a banner out of their university under a Palestinian flag with a banner that said, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." In other words, these art students and intellectuals in Amsterdam are calling openly for the destruction of Israel. So now I'm bringing this over to your experiences. I want you to talk to me about your experiences on Maastricht. Talk to me about the permanently, my opinion, one-sided anti-Israel events that is happening on your campus there.
Right. Thank you so much, first of all, for all the information. And once again, I'm very happy to be here. Now, I'd like to first make the distinction that we have to talk about the academic life at the university level and also in academia and professors. And then there's also the social aspect of having the students and their cause for social justice. Because nowadays, the whole American campus experience, which is already problematic in the first place, um, in a bunch of different aspects. So, for example, the social justice movements, the concept of intersectionality, which has excluded Jews and people that speak out about Israel in a way, because it's all seen as oppressed versus oppressor. And this polarization really reaches another level when it comes to students. And in this case, especially during the war, it was actually quite hard to really raise the other viewpoint. So there was a bit of a limitation of freedom of speech, if you want, about that specific subject, about Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also just in general about bringing up Israel in the first place at all. So Jewish students for a while have not been feeling comfortable, I guess, in identifying themselves as such, knowing that they'll be immediately glued together in terms of the narrative with Israelis and the actions of the Israeli government. So that is something that has kind of caused issues in terms of the mindset of students that have never met a Jewish person before, never an Israeli person before, and suddenly put themselves in one or two camps. Uh, the pro-Palestinian one or the pro-Israeli one. But for the pro-Israeli one, if you want to put it that way, there is really not that much of a voice, and it's kind of harder to come out. So there's been a bunch of incidents, which I can go into later, but generally it's a problem of the narrative and the way in which we discuss this conflict in the outside world. It's like a football game.
Okay. I read something that you, I think somebody had interviewed you, and one of the reasons I wanted you on the show today, because you made a statement about, I don't know if it was a professor or lecturer at the university who advised the Jewish students over there that, and the expression he used was, if you want to keep your job, don't say you're Jewish and don't support Israel or hide your support of Israel. What could you tell us about that?
Right. So obviously, this was something that I'd gone to know about through an Israeli and a Jewish professor, respectively. So there were two of them. And I believe it's best for anonymity to not mention their names here. But in short, they've been told by colleagues, especially in the social sciences field and the law faculty, that it's best to not speak up or like write something about it because it's really, as I said again, like this polarization is very evident. And there is this, I wouldn't say gagging, but more like a kind of tabooization of talking about Israel in any way, shape, or form. And also, it's pretty iffy to bring up the conflict as a whole. So obviously, the university takes a stance of not taking a position in this, right? Where they can't really go full BDS, but there are a lot of professors that actually do. So the university does not officially take a stance, but they'll allow events that demonize Israel and, yeah, basically let organizations that want the destruction of the state into their lectures, lecture halls, and a lot of professors to actually make statements and motivate people to go and protest and sign the BDS bill and so forth. So that is quite problematic. And professors themselves, also Jewish professors and Israeli professors, definitely feel this phenomenon. But unfortunately, in terms of the numbers that we have, even as Jewish people and just Jewish academics, it's hard. It's a tough battle. Let's say it's a uphill battle.
Ethan, do you know how many students are altogether at Maastricht University, and of that number, the total number, do you know how many are Jewish?
Right. I believe that we have around 18 or 20,000, not just students overall in the city. It's a pretty small city, but with a lot of students. In terms of the Jewish students themselves, it's a bit hard to narrow down. We estimate that there's between 100 and 150 of them. Just spread out across different faculties and whatsoever from different nationalities and so forth. But it's hard to estimate because we've had issues in organizing the Jewish community. We were usually just on a WhatsApp group for a while, and if you were Jewish and you would basically have to stumble into somebody who was already on that WhatsApp group, and you'd have to expose your Jewish identity. Now, that of course is something that less and less Jewish students feel comfortable with. So it's even harder to find our community and strengthen ourselves if people already go into the mindset of I can't expose myself as Jewish because of the fear that people will really just ask me dozens of questions, and it could also be a bit toxic and people feel dangerous about it, or in danger about it. And it reminds me of that story how in Germany, for example, that a lot of mayors were saying to Jewish people that they should take off their kippah or yarmulke, basically to feel safe in the street. And it definitely feels like this happened as well at universities. People take off their metaphorical kippahs in order to be accepted.
I want to go into the issue both of the on the campus in Maastricht and also maybe in Holland generally about the pursuit of Jews, um, uh, the pursuit of people who support Israel. Um, I don't know. I don't know whether it was you or somebody else, but I think you reported on or spoke about certain things that were posted on your dorm, on your door at the at the college or something like that, or it was a swastika or a Star of David or something. Can you tell us about that?
Right, of course. So first of all, yeah, right. So first of all, it wasn't a dorm, a university building. So it happened to be like in a shared apartment building throughout the city with students in them, of course. But it happened once I came back home one late evening after Carnival, which is a big thing here. And yeah, I found my mezuzah ripped from the door or the doorpost, and yeah, it basically being smashed on the ground. Now, it had a little Star of David on it. I don't know if people would assume or say that that is specifically anti-Zionist, that they would do something like that. But in this university, you never know. Yeah, so that was taken off my door, and I also got a nice surprise in the form of a swastika carved into my door instead. So we did not actually find the person that committed this. And my first reaction, actually, when I saw it, was to laugh because it was just to be expected at a certain moment. And I wanted to make sure I really went into university with the mindset of I'm not gonna, well, I suppose, cower, and I'm not gonna shelter myself from these type of things. If they happen, they happen. It just shows me the sentiment that's out there, and that is precisely what we need to change. Really, what I'm trying to do here. So yeah, in a nutshell, no, we did not find the person responsible, and there were no cameras in the building, unfortunately. And the investigation by the police, which I was kind of pushed into doing or reporting, but I knew that was not going to be something good out of it. Basically, yeah, consisted of going around my neighbor's door and asking if they drew the swastika or saw something suspicious, and that's the end of that.
Okay, I want to put you on the spot, if you call it that, on this next question, Ethan. When you identify the people who are vehemently proactive, hyperactive when it comes to anti-Israel activism, and also where you might be getting anti-Semitic remarks as well, are you able to identify the political leanings or ideological leanings of these people? By that I mean, are they from the far right, or they tend to be from the far left, or are they also part of what I call the Red Green Alliance, which is the far left, together with people who may support the Muslim Brotherhood or Islamic organizations, or people from the Middle East, students perhaps from the Middle East on campus there?
Right. So I think it's important to mention as well that there's just a lot of ignorance going on as a whole, and that people stick with ideologies, and that has definitely been the case here at university as well. So, in at least in Western Europe, having far right or right wing movements at universities has been kind of taboo and is not as big as the current trends, which are more into socialism and towards far left, I would say. It does not make everybody like that that actually supports the movement that is anti-Israel, but just the leadership, the sort of people that actually go out and look for active members among people that are ignorant about the situation. But yeah, so in short, most of these movements are from the left or leaning, and basically there's this concept as well of intersectionality of allying yourself with other left-wing movements against the oppressor. And in this case, that philosophy has completely worked. And yeah, there's partnerships between, for example, Amnesty and Black Lives Matter in Maastricht and others that basically take up the demonization of Israel's side. Um, and yeah, the Red Green Alliance, I can't really comment too much on that because I feel like, yeah, there are some people that are kind of advocating for a bigger alliance. But currently, the like bigger movements and the Free Palestine organization that is actually active on the campus is definitely headed with some of those elements. But in general, I would say that there's still a lot of just regular Western European students that, in my opinion, don't know enough about the conflict but believe themselves to be doing something proactively only by fighting against one entity to resolve the issues of another, which is a bit problematic. And yeah, I think it's all about education at this point.
Does this what I identify as the Red Green Alliance that you see among the students, does that reflect itself also in the lecturers and the professors who are I will put it this way, pushing a one-sided biased agenda when it comes to talking about Middle East politics, particularly Israel. I mean, is it that you also find that the lecturers and the professors are not talking about an even-handed, open debate on issues that we're talking about here, but basically they're the ones that are propagating the ideology and the indoctrination that the students are expressing in their activism?
Well, in this case, it actually has to be a bit well disconnected from the typical story because I would say that the university itself does not really comment too much on the conflict itself or Middle East issues in terms of where it's taking a stance. On the whole question or like on the whole topic of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, the issue is that the university just does not mention it at all. However, uses the same concepts when it discusses other conflicts or other worldly problems. It's kind of done out of a left wing or progressive way of thinking. And obviously, if we discuss a lot of issues with that ideology or that frame in mind, and then just apply it blankly to the Israeli Palestinian conflict, plus the reality of it just being such a bipolar, like way of comprehending in the outside world, where it's basically akin to a football game and you just have to stand by your ideology, which at times can be taught to you, and at other times is something you might have grown up with, whether they be influences from the academics or not, or academia. That is really a subjective way of looking at it because we can't determine for sure if it's a university that has caused issues, but they definitely don't talk about Jews or Israel as a whole, and that is the biggest problem to me.
All right, why I mentioned that was because tell me about the Free Palestine Maastricht, which operates under the banner, I believe, that this organization, this group, stands for what they call freedom of expression. And it has the official approval of the campus administrators. And I understand that the Free Palestine Maastricht tries to push what I call a false narrative that people like you oppress freedom of speech about Palestine because you're supporting Israel, while they're the ones who are actually closing down pro-Israel speakers and events. Is this correct?
Right. So before I can start on that, I just want to say that I don't support this or that. I won't say I support peace, but I'm of course gonna be standing with Israel and wishing for its survival. Now, the for me, in terms of what Free Palestine is doing, is very counterproductive in the sense where it's supposedly looking for peace, but heading it with a very violent way of thinking. They also aim to be the next BDS chapter in the Netherlands as well, have disrupted social and cultural events that were hosted or sponsored by the Israeli government, and a few more cultural events that were just in general, like using Israeli products. Now, generally, they're still passing around a BDS letter at the university itself, and obviously, whenever there's a Jewish students that complained about the protest in which in Arabic there was some inflammatory language, pro-Hamas language, etc., we were basically branded as just Zionists who don't represent the Jewish community. And in the way that they've defined Zionism, which is already a big problem with itself, in the way that it's defined by anti-Israel people, is to, yeah, it's basically equated to fascism or racism or terrorism. And obviously, like if you already brand somebody with that notion in mind, say that they're not Jewish or say that they don't represent Judaism because they prefer to stick with a tiny group like Neturei Kartide, which they can tokenize as a Jewish group that supports the destruction of Israel. Then it gets problematic because we lose our own voices. We basically already said that people just don't even take us as our group anymore. And whenever we call somebody out, it's very strange for people to not take us seriously. We can't use something we can't say this is anti-Semitic and then continue and explain why it's anti-Semitic because we're already shut down. We don't really work in terms of the philosophy here, the Jewish students. We don't really work with the philosophy or calling something anti Semitic and running away. No, we make our point. We argue why something is anti Semitic and why at times the narrative of Free Palestine Maastricht will not lead to peace. It will lead to, well, slaughter to be quite honest, and even more bloodshed on either side.
Yeah, I don't think people really have become aware, despite the fact that I wrote about it. I wrote a book called Fighting Hamas, BDS, and Anti-Semitism. And I wrote this following a visit I made to Holland, and I was invited to speak at the Jewish Liberal Center in Amsterdam. And there, my talk was infiltrated by three of the leading members of the BDS movement in Holland. And when he came to Q&A, I allowed him to go on his rant, and I don't want to go into details here, but basically I wiped the floor with him by exposing his lies and telling the truth of what was going on in Israel. I'll give you just one. I don't want to take too much time about this. I'll give you one example. One of many examples that silenced him. He was talking at that time about what he called the Israeli illegal blockade on Gaza. I don't know if you remember this. It was after the Mabi Marmara, the flotilla incident. So, where he was claiming that oppressive Israeli policies were depriving the people of Gaza with essential supplies. So I asked him one simple question. I said, well, tell me, how many trucks a day do you think are going into Gaza from Israel? And he didn't want to answer. And I said, give it your best shot. And of course, the audience are stuck in the middle here. They're listening to this Q&A going on between the two of us. And he refused to give the answer. And I said, it's either you don't know, and I'll tell you about it, or you do know, and you don't want to admit it. But there were 800 trucks a day going in from Israel into Gaza. And I said, what sort of blockade is that? But if you say you're supporting the Palestinians, let me ask you an alternative question. How many trucks a day go into Gaza from Egypt at that time? Didn't want to answer that. So I told him, zero, none. So if you're really pretending to really support the human rights of the Palestinians, why aren't you doing BDS against Egypt? How many times have you stood in Dam Square every weekend and had demonstrations and pictures and placards talking about boycotting Egypt? You haven't. I mean, that was just one example of how you can catch out these people when they're fraud. And of course, later on, that brought me to write another book, which has been a student's favorite, called BDS for Idiots. Because once you go into the lies and the whatever, however money is spent on that, however enormous their parades and charades are on campus, when you come down to it and you find the element truth and you answer by plain facts and common sense, you can beat them every time. But what I want to say from this is, how easy is it for you in order to have events, pro-Israeli events, on campus at Maastricht? How easy is it for you to bring Israeli or pro-Israeli professors or lecturers or experts onto the campus in order to address the issues? Is it possible at all?
Now, it was pretty difficult for a lot of reasons in the past few years because there was a whole pandemic, of course, which kind of made it impossible to hold events for a while. But we've been active in terms of bringing ourselves to protests, anti-racism protests, etc. However, having events that are specifically about Israel, Israelis, or Jews, oh, sorry about that. Having those kind of events has unfortunately been a bit sticky because either the university themselves don't want it because it's inflammatory, but there's also issues in which we don't know who the audience will be when we come and directly discuss Israel. So imagine if we have an event about Israelis' respect for human rights. That would most likely be disrupted or boycotted, or there would be a staged walkout. We also have issue with whatever kind of event that we're doing. There always being somebody who pushes for BDS. Um, but yeah, we're trying to set up events again, and really we're trying to work with the strategy in terms of first of all fighting ignorance, and then being able to discuss subjects that are more of a political nature in this sense. So yeah, that has there's a few steps. We can't really introduce the entire subject of the political reality in the area without actually doing some lighter events first. So at this moment, we're still doing our best to have a strong, stable community that isn't afraid to represent themselves, and we'll see where it goes from here. But I'm pretty sure that people understand the issues that happened after the May conflict, and people want to work on it.
Yeah. Well, one of the points that struck me from what you just said then is of course it raises question I ask quite a lot is you mentioned the word inflammatory. So my rhetorical question is, why is it inflammatory to have a Jewish or an Israeli speaker on the campus, but it's not inflammatory for the other side to have Israel Apartheid Week, for instance, which is another fact of life? Why is that not inflammatory? But as it's a rhetoric question from my point of view. But let me come on to something else. I read somewhere that you operate something you call Jew-splaining. Have I got that right, Ethan? Tell me what it is.
Yeah, you're right completely. Although, okay, so before I respond to this, I have to go after this question, just so you know, and then we can maybe pick up if you want on another time. But okay, so yeah, I operate something known as juice planing, which is just a concept. Honestly, it's not enough a specific organization or movement. But yeah, I'm of the idea or the notion that whenever somebody is telling you you're the first Jew that they're encountered, that should be an opportunity for people to not shy away from their identity and explain it, because it is such a crucial event. I mean, sorry, it's such a crucial notion in terms of representing our people and also Israel in the long term, to actually not shy away from these things, whether we want it or not. First of all, we're so few in European universities, we're so few around the earth, and we're so few in terms of having to explain our identity. We always have a microphone shoved up to our face. It's either up to us if we want to run away from it or actually respond and try to improve our image.
Okay. Ethan, I can't let you go without one final question. Tell me about EJA, the European Jewish Alliance, and your role in it.
Right. So it's the European Jewish Association in this case. But my role in it is that I'm the youth development and creative projects officer. So in terms of youth development, that basically means taking care of activities for people between the ages of 18 and 30 or 35, training them in terms of representing themselves on campus, training them professional skills such as journalism, public speaking, marketing, and also on the side we take care of really putting people together with a network of politicians that we interact with, so that we're trying to bridge the older generation and the newer generation and really create Jewish leaders. Aside from that, the creative projects that we do, we have an organization or a movement named Make Their Memory Shine, which is all about cleaning Stoppelsteine or stumbling stones across Europe. And we bring in Jewish people, non-Jewish people, and we try to do this all over Europe to really try to show that there is a better way, a newer way to teach about the Holocaust, and at the same time bring in young people to do something good and commemorate whether they are Jewish or not, and they can always interact, and people can have the whole Jew-splaining experience.
That's wonderful. And Ethan, I'd like an opportunity sometime in the future to go into more detail of this and how to coordinate with various organizations I'm involved in, both in Israel and various countries, not only in Europe, but outside of Europe as well. But Ethan, I want to thank you for your time. And I want to thank you for highlighting an issue that I'm going to follow up on in another video regarding the sensitive and delicate situation of Jews in Holland and also people who support Israel, who seem to be under siege in your country as well. But Ethan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. I'll hope to see you around next time. Have a nice day.
Very good, Ethan. I want to thank Ethan for his time and his sharing with us some of his rather not so pleasant experiences of being a student on a campus in Holland. Things need to change. I hope this video will be one of the reasons that will actually create a conversation in certain circles in Holland and other places as well. But this is Barry Shaw for The View from Israel. saying thank you. Please share this video.